All right, all right, all right. Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to the
Buenos
morning show.
dias.
Buenos dias. And as we're sitting here, I'm realizing, of course, that I forgot to change the episode 5 to episode 6.
Can you just put your hand over it? Just reach down and block it with your.
Almost. Oh man.
So glad this is a vlog instead of a podcast. No one's listening, right? They're
Yes.
just watching these weird actions.
Exactly. Yeah. For those who are on audio only, we will do that now again. User moves hand towards the bottom of the frame. He misses the number multiple times.
He makes grunting sounds. I love it now on Netflix when the subtitles will come on and it'll say stuff like "man walking to dramatic music" or "glass crunching."
Yeah,
you know?
I wish that was like my intro into the scene. Like just like in real life, you just like walk into a room and someone follows you around. That'd be a pretty
just
fun bit.
narrating that for you.
Yeah, we should probably do that at some point.
Man looks confused staring at coffee menu.
Well, what better way to start off your day than a close-up of Ryder? Welcome
Ryder
to the
moves his
Helpful
head
for
around.
Life morning show. I'm Reed Garcia.
I'm Ryder Richards, the co-host.
Yes, and here we are, and as in true morning show fashion, today, starting, a couple minutes after, and with the episode 5 still showing, but again, the reason we fail is to make you feel better.
Don't you feel better about yourself? Like,
Yeah.
God, if I had a morning show, I wouldn't make those mistakes.
I know, exactly. Well, we have some exciting news here on the morning show. So, thanks to, technology and stuff, we bought a new computer. After doing our test episode on Friday, where we were dealing with the musician and some new software and things like that, we realized that as the computer started to set on fire, that it might be time for an upgrade.
Yeah, it's funny how you think that's usually with cars, right? When smoke starts coming out of the engine, but it works with computers too.
Yeah. It's funny because just yesterday, Danielle and I were sitting in our living room, and I had a Spotify playlist that ended. And so the house was completely silent, which I don't know about you, but that's pretty rare in our household. Just have absolutely no noise. And I was sitting there doing something on the computer. No, you're not like really typing or anything. And she was writing in her notebook. So it was actually very quiet. You ever have your house be that quiet?
We, after watching that movie, Quiet, then yes, like we started taking our shoes off and there's no longer allowed to be noise in the house. We just kind of creep around and try not to wake each other up or disturb each other's peace. It's what makes for a great marriage.
Oh,
is really just
nice.
Being invisible to your spouse.
Well, Ryder, I don't know if I've exposed this to you yet, but the audience is on the edge of their seat now, wondering what comes after that
Reed's
sentence.
about to expose something.
I can see the clickbait title already. You get the joy of realizing that I have very little pop culture awareness. I've heard of Quiet Place. I'm not sure what Quiet is.
That's probably I don't actually know either. I saw that movie, whatever the first one was.
Okay.
I heard there was a second one out, but
Yeah, okay.
the first one was scary. There was
So we're equally bad with the references in this
I'm
case.
horrible
All
at
right,
it.
perfect.
It is funny because we were talking just yesterday about how many book references I threw out within an hour. I was like, there's at least 5 or 6 books.
Yeah.
But yeah, when it comes to things like movies, I'm like, that one with that one person in it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it has a. Oh yeah, in that Scorsese film. Yes. Well, today, we wanted to, in the spirit of technology, we wanted to talk a little bit about some of the new technology that's out there, for those, especially for those people who've never heard of it before, or really dealt with it, or always kind of wondered, like, what is that thing? And we're gonna loosely cover cryptocurrency and NFC. And I want to just be completely frank with you guys. Like, we decided to talk about this about 10 minutes ago. Now, we both have some background knowledge on it, but don't expect this to be your 5-minute explainer video.
No, this will probably mostly be the confusing video that you go, those guys didn't know anything.
Yeah.
It'll probably actually get us some comments in the thread, which is what we're really going for here.
Right. Again, the trick is to just fail so fabulously that people can't help but like comment and be like, oh, That's an interesting one.
Yeah, right. Well, I think there's going to be a lot of corrections. Like, for instance, I'm right now trying to think of the guy who started Ethereum, and I'm thinking his name is like Vitali, and I'm just shorting out on it, but it's probably Viscali or Visic.
Oh, I saw him in that Scorsese film.
Yeah,
that
right.
was a
Wasn't
good one.
that a great flick? Man.
Oh man, names is another one that I'm not going to be able to help you on that one.
Yeah.
But yeah, so let's real quickly just I'll try my best at giving a quick explain of what cryptocurrency really even is, and then I'll let you kind of chime in and see kind of augment that. So cryptocurrency, which is kind of composed of two parts of the word. Currency, which is a fancy way of saying money. Is there another broader definition of that?
Might just talk about it as a medium of exchange.
Okay, medium of exchange. Yeah, that makes sense. And then the first part is crypto, crypto is probably short for, like cryptography, but even by itself as a stem, as part of that word crypto, I'm trying to think of how to describe it in words, but I guess it means something that's been obscured in a way to where it could not be seen by other people. Can you think of another way to word that?
Oh, I think that's a pretty good one. I'm instantly just sort of jumping off into deeper levels of it. But yeah, I think any kind of cryptography, typically there's sort of a pattern or a system to unlock it.
Yes.
To unobscure it.
Yeah, so in cryptography, which graph, here's some more STEM words for you since I learned this back in 5th grade. Graph means write. So cryptography is kind of like encoding your writing, right? And so in the encryption process, there's encrypting and decrypting. So basically you take a word, or a phrase or whatever, say hello writer, and then you plug it into some, to abstract it to general level, you plug it into some program and it comes back and it ends up being like 57 hyphen dash at sign this. It changes it up, right?
Right.
And that's very much a simplification. But if you were to look at that and be like, oh, what is that? You wouldn't be able to tell. However, if you then plug that into the decryption software, the other end of that program, then it will turn it back into what you want, which is hello writer.
And this is the magic decoder ring, that we all wanted whenever, or what was it, like Georgie in the Christmas story?
Yeah, you shoot your eye out. Except, not with the decoder ring. But.
Right, no. But yeah, when he's sitting in the bathroom and he, jots down all the secret message.
Right.
And it's just like, buy more Ovaltine or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, back in the day. So they covered guns and cryptography. It's a timeless film.
There was a whole period of time when cryptography, anything dealing with being a spy, was like, it's probably still cool, but I think now it's not as coveted as a job. But when I was a kid, spies were super cool, and everyone wanted to do crypto, and that, people had little gadgets, and you could buy things, that there were little toys that were spy toys. Like I had these glasses that had mirrors on the inside, so you could see behind you.
Oh,
right.
Nice.
And these were just super cheesy little toys. But as a 12-year-old boy, this was amazing stuff.
Yeah. Well, see, that's the reason why we have both myself and Ryder here, is because Ryder can relay. So since World War I, he's been able to see in his life the development of cryptography and how it's affected popular culture.
Yeah, we used to have these blankets, and we'd have a fire, and we'd just wave the blankets, and these signals would. Yeah.
We started off with a shiny rock, and if you just moved it just right. No, but yeah, so that's what cryptography is, kind of at its most basic, and if you want to do it at home with like a little slider wheel, you can even have your 26 letters of the alphabet, and then you have the 26 letters below that on 2 sheets of paper, and you just kind of shift it a little bit, and then you just basically replace it. That's like one of the most simple. I think it's called a shift cipher. I could be wrong about that. But yeah, so how does that tie into cryptography? Oh, well, one other thing I wanted to say about cryptography, a very popular example of this is something called the Enigma code. So if any of you guys are interested in history, or any of this kind of interests you and you haven't heard much about it, check it out, because back in World War II, it was a really big deal, and some would argue what enabled the Allied parties to win the war was basically and I could be messing some of the details. I don't know if it was U.S. or just the Allied as a whole, but I think it was the U.S. had managed to somehow tap the German communications, which both the U.S. and or both Allied and Axis parties they were always tapping each other. Tapping and wiretapping has been a thing for a long time, which, by the way, the term wiretapping was literally because back in the day, you would literally put some sort of device onto a wire, and oftentimes you would have these spies go into wherever place they need to infiltrate. Probably seen a movie doing essentially the same thing, and they go clamp something on.
Right, and like you would have to think that today, what is the equivalent? And it's somebody sitting behind a computer in like a silo in Vegas or something.
Right.
That's, and the wire tapping has no more physical components to it anymore.
Yeah,
right?
I'm sure it might, but it's not as it's not as necessary as it used to be.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. But it is kind of fascinating because what they have found with security is that oftentimes you can have fantastic security at a company as far as locking everything down, but you still can't control the people, right? So someone can get to the person, and the person can then still leak the documents out. So it is funny how a lot of this kind of wartime stuff, spying, increased our cryptography. We increased all these different ways to like hide information and obscure things, and then that has also been taken up by businesses now for the sake of security, right? So we have wars that are going on around us all the time that are basically invisible to us.
Yeah. Well, real quick, as we're talking about this, I could see some users, or some of our audience being like, "Wow, this is kind of interesting," and I can see others are like, "I'm not interested in this." Guy's glazing over.
We're going to talk about cryptocurrency, not being a spy.
But for those of you, regardless of where you are on that spectrum, I just want to dangle a little carrot for you. Some people would look at this and be like, "Wow, this is kind of magical. Like, how does this one thing turn into this other thing, and especially how the heck does money get involved?" Well, it's kind of magical. So later on this show, we're also going to have something that some people think is a little bit magical as well, and we're actually going to bring Danielle on, and she's going to do a tarot reading.
Yes, because our fates are actually encrypted.
Yes, they are. So hold on for that one. We'll decrypt that one for you later. But back to the cryptography. So the Enigma code. So the Allied had successfully tapped into their communications, but both parties operated under this assumption. They knew that eventually they would probably get tapped. And so therefore they would talk in these codes, whether it be Morse code or radio or whatever, they would have some sort of code where they would talk or communicate differently, right? Mm-hmm. So that way, even if someone's listening on the other, for those who are old enough to have been around when the party lines with the telephones before they were cell phones, where you could listen in to your sister having that conversation. Well, instead of hearing the conversation, you would hear, oh yeah, Foxtrot Bravo 72, or
yes, right.
Which I don't know about how my sister's conversations went.
Every code starts.
Yeah. But so yeah, the Enigma code, basically they were able to use this device to decrypt, to unencode, to decode the Germans' plans. And then this is where it gets really interesting, because it becomes almost a little bit of an ethical thing, where we now know, we being the Allied powers, we now knew some of the things they were going to do and the places they are going to potentially bomb and the places they are going to attack. But then how do you know, like, when I should divulge that information, when I should act on that information? Because if I do, guess what? Now they're going to know that we're onto them.
Yes, yeah, and then they'll dump that code. So, yeah, what is the big score that you're looking for there? And how many people get sacrificed so that you can, I don't know, have that big score? Whatever that might be. And, maybe finding this vulnerability or weakness over time. Yeah, it's actually kind of fascinating whenever you get into this idea of having information that is secret and you have the potential to use it for good or for bad, and maybe just sitting on it could be considered bad.
Yeah, and actually I just heard on a tech news podcast I listen to every week. It's called This Week in Tech, Twit. On this, I think it was this week's episode, maybe last week's episode, where they were talking about, and it's a topic that comes up many times, where a company or the government, they discover some sort of vulnerability with the software that lots and lots of people, lots of companies use, but they reserve the fact that they know about that vulnerability so that they could take advantage of it to learn a little bit more about the bad guys, right?
Yeah, trying to hack it.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, well, we're not going to tell everyone. We know there may be some harm, but we think by being able to capture those bad people, it would be worth it for us.
Yeah, and this goes back too to the, I guess, the recent whistleblower on Facebook, right? So she had information that wasn't supposed to be public and came public with it because she thought it was doing harm. And so we end up having those kind of situations too of whistleblowers who, yeah, I don't know, like you have what is supposed to be private information and they're like, I can't hold on to this anymore. It is hurting too many people. And so they come forward with it. So it's kind of fascinating to sort of see the multiple uses of what happens once we start having things that become secrets. And this is really fascinating if, as a tangent for me, in childhood development, they often say that the way that children start to identify as an adult and actually start to grow up is when they realize that they have certain information that other people don't know about. So it's essentially by keeping secrets, and this is R.D. Laing who says some of these things, that it's by keeping secrets that you start to eternalize what it means to be an individual self.
That's interesting, and I think we could way dive down that.
Yeah, sorry,
so I'll
total
resist.
tangent.
But no,
Yeah.
but I like that. That's interesting. No, especially because it kind of ties in with some other things of, keeping things secret. And some of that also could be, their own feelings and their own thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And, that could be the beginning of the end for the positive sides of being a child, right? That creativity,
Right.
that not caring what other people think, things like that. But back to the crypto thing, I thought it was very relevant for us to give some of this extra background information because there's a lot that comes into play when you talk about cryptocurrency. And then one thing we'll get to as well is the mix between government and private and how that all plays in with money. But so far we told you, roughly what cryptography is. We told you a little bit of history, talking about the Enigma code and how that was a very big use of cryptography, one of the more well-known ones, which there are movies on which I can't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah.
But
There's movies like Windwalker or Windtalkers or something like this too, where Navajos use their language because it's so impossible to decrypt.
Yeah, no, and they've long been used as sort of cryptography. And so how does that all tie back into cryptocurrency? One last definition, I say last, but who knows if that's true. There's a term called end-to-end encryption. And what that means is, let's say I'm trying to send a message to Ryder. Let's say my text message, for example. And in this case, Ryder and I both happen to have iPhones. And when I use the Messages app and I send him an iMessage using that blue bubble, I say, hey, Ryder's farts smell like flowers. And then it goes off into the cloud, and then not the fart cloud, just the internet cloud. And then it goes all the way over to Ryder. And then Ryder can read whatever it was I said about his farts.
Yeah, and then I'm just like, oh, that's the code word.
That's the code word, yeah. But the thing is, when it's end-to-end encrypted, as soon as it leaves my device, nobody else can read what I wrote.
Yeah.
It has been encrypted on my device, and it goes all the way through the cloud, which includes through AT&T, my provider, maybe through a different provider for you, through some other third-party servers that help make what's called the backbone of the internet, and then all the way back into your phone. And then finally, it's decrypted on your phone when you see it in the Messages app. And the only way for somebody to see anything over here is if they were to somehow decrypt that, which right now is effectively impossible. That may change with something called quantum computing.
Yes.
But that's realistically probably multiple years away, if not decade plus away. And I just wanted to include that fact. For those people who have heard those terms before, that's one of the big things about quantum computing, which could be both good and bad.
Yes. No, I mean, quantum computing is one of those scary decoder rings.
Yeah.
Right? Because it can do, like, apparently all probabilities at once, which is kind of insane. I can't really wrap my head around it.
Yeah, topic for another day for sure.
But it's so fascinating. But yeah, when we start getting into how this becomes currency, then part of one thing we haven't mentioned yet is blockchain, right? Blockchain is part of the method of encryption and decryption that happens here, but it's also sort of a distributed network, if I understand properly. But you probably know more about it than I do.
Okay, well, yeah. To be frank, I have no idea how much you know, right? But so I'm glad you brought up the blockchain, moving us along. So we've got the cryptography, the things that encrypt it. And then, so what the heck is cryptocurrency? So cryptocurrency, and I'm not sure if it exclusively uses the blockchain, but the vast majority of times I've heard cryptocurrency mentioned, it involves the blockchain. But I could be wrong on that one. So the blockchain is basically a fancy way of saying, and again, corrections may abound of all the edge cases and things like that. But for the layperson, this is a good definition. A blockchain uses what's called a public ledger. So basically, especially if you're a little older and you've had to, for example, balance your own checkbook, as you write something out, you send the check, give it to somebody, and then you flip over to your balance page, and then you keep track. Nowadays, in the computer era, if you were born in, I don't know, the 80s or later, something like that, especially the 90s, you never did any of that. You just had the computer do it all for you.
Right. We don't have to keep track. The bank does it for you.
Exactly,
right.
Which is nice. But that's one term for that, basically record of transactions in your balance is a ledger. And so by having what's called a public ledger, what it is it's a public record of all of the transactions that occur. And one of the common misconceptions with crypto is, cryptocurrency is anonymous. And you could do whatever crimes you want and get away with it, and no one can ever know who you are. There's a little bit of truth to that, but the reality is most of the popular cryptocurrencies actually are not as anonymous as people think.
No, and from what I understand, the reason why any of these the cryptocurrency in general is so secure is because every transaction is recorded and can be traced somewhere.
Right. And so that's where that public ledger comes in. And so let's just talk about Bitcoin. That's probably the most popular one, the one heard most, right? And so with Bitcoin, let's say, for example, I want to send Ryder $5. I don't know why I'd want to do that, but let's just pretend that I did, right? So I will go use some third-party software. Basically, I will have, instead of a physical leather wallet that I'd have in my back pocket, I have a digital wallet that I've uploaded some money to, right? And then that wallet, it has an address, just like an address to your home, but it's probably this really long string of random characters. And so then I say, okay, I want to send money to Ryder. Ryder gives me his address, which is this really long string of characters, and I put it into this software, and I say, all right, send Ryder, probably 0.00000001 or whatever, some fraction of a Bitcoin. And then it goes over to you. And then on that public ledger, you can see, we'll just say my address was 5 and his address was 20, just to be simple. You could see, okay, from address 5 to address 20, there was this amount of coin transferred. And then guess what? That public ledger, a copy of that goes to, and again, this may have been like streamlined since, but originally it was literally everybody. Everyone had a copy of that public ledger, at least somewhere in the cloud that they're pinging. And that means that each copy of those public ledgers were then compared. And if there were any kind of discrepancies, those could be dealt with. And the whole point of this public ledger was, how do we have some sort of self-automating system where you don't need some independent third party to come in and check, a la, which is usually the government, or at least some sort of government agency.
So as this has always been described to me, that a lot of people that are super into crypto in general, it's been called the libertarian's wet dream. Right?
Yeah, I like that.
They just can't help themselves but love this because it cuts the government out of the financial sector. So when you start thinking about things like the FDA and some of the things that they've done, I think after World War I, there's a point where Roosevelt actually recalled all the gold in the nation and said, no, we're taking all your gold back, right? So these moments in time where you're just like, government, you can't do that.
Right.
Like, which is a funny notion we could get into at some point, that we're only in a democracy until the government declares otherwise, which is what happens when we're under tension.
Right.
And so at that point, we're not actually ever a democracy. That entire thing is just a disguise. It's a very thin veneer, because at any point the government could recall the money. They could recall anything they wanted. So one of the fascinating things about blockchain and cryptocurrency is it starts to sidestep some of that without a set authority. And that's one of the things I think ideologically they're really going for, is getting rid of a singular authority in any of these spaces.
Yes, and at least my initial view, and I feel like a lot of people's initial view is about us. And in this case, that would literally be the U.S., America. Like, okay, how does that affect us? But reality is this is meant to be essentially a third-party neutral currency, because in case those of you who aren't aware, currencies are valued at different amounts. So the U.S. dollar is one of, if not the strongest forms of currency. And just go down to one of our neighbors, the Mexican peso. That is not as valuable as the U.S. dollar, and so it's usually somewhere between 15 and 20 pesos per dollar. And so that means the peso is not as valuable. And those numbers are changing every day. And just like every other good financial institution, there's plenty of people making money on how those values change.
Yes. They start gambling on the change rather than the economy itself, right? So
Right.
It's a really fascinating thing, and we could get into speculative economic transactions at some point. Basically, it's like gambling on a large scale based on how an economy does or how the actual production value goes. And what's fascinating is apparently it's a massive, massive part of the GDP is just speculative transactions.
I don't doubt it.
Anyway, it's off into another
for
tangent.
sure. Yeah.
But I really do enjoy how strange and abstract this world has gotten. And the idea that somebody's like, I'm going to go back to the gold standard and just stockpile coins or something. I mean, we seem to have moved as multiple countries so far beyond that I don't know how much value that holds anymore. But then again, on the other side, we're sitting here talking about crypto as this possible future currency that could bypass these problems. And yet, if I understand right, China tried to shut it down for the entire nation. They were just like, no, we're not doing crypto. We're not doing Bitcoin. And this just happened, I think, a day or two ago.
Okay, I'm not familiar with that. So
yeah, and I just heard yesterday from a friend who said something about it, and I was just like, oh, I have to look that up. And I just haven't had time yet.
I'm not surprised
So
if that is
everyone,
the case,
hop
right?
on your phones.
Look it up and let us know.
Yeah, you liar. Nothing like that happened at all.
But yeah, so we're talking about the crypto, talking about the public ledger, talking about what one of those transactions looked like, and really the question becomes, what's the point, right? Why does somebody want to do all of these things? Well, a lot of it really comes back to the government and the government control and influence over what that I'll say dollar, but really any currency is worth, right? And because what happens with the dollar, for those of you who aren't aware, at least here in America, the U.S. if you're not aware, just look at a lot of the stimulus packages and things like that have happened within the last year, which is that the government can essentially print money. They can put more dollars into the system, and the first gut reaction is, "Whoa, grumble, grumble! Why would people want to do that?"
Inflation, right? Yeah. Like this becomes one of the things they argue about quite a bit. Yeah, it is the grumble, grumble, grumble. It's that I currently have X amount of money. And if you pump more into the system, it makes every one of the dollars I currently own less valuable, right? Because if our economy is the same, and that's essentially our earning potential, then, and everyone's gauging us based off of our earning potential and you're dividing that by the number of dollars out there, that'd be a very simple calculus for this, then you end up with a sort of fixed point. So by releasing 900 trillion more dollars or whatever it is into the economy, you actually deflate all the money that already exists. So what I used to have as a dollar is now, according to the peso, less valuable because we have artificially created more money without actually increasing production value for the country.
Yeah, and one of the mildly distracted by the loud dumpsters moving outside of my window.
Is it Tuesday? Dumpster Tuesday.
Trash Tuesday. Dumpster Tuesday. But yeah, so one of the reasons why, really the main reason why more money is released is to affect how much money is out there. And one of the key terms is what's called the Fed. I'm going to blank on the term now, but basically the interest rate that the Fed sets, the federal. Yeah. When I say the Fed, I mean the Federal Bank of the United States,
the regulatory body. For
the regulatory
all
body.
Of the money. Yes.
Yeah, I may be messing up some of the exact
Which, by the way,
names.
If you want to get into a weird history, look up the history of how they were created, dissolved, and then recreated again.
Oh, really? Sounds
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah. It's so bizarre.
Yeah, and so the Fed has this rate. Let's say it's like 2.5% or something like that, and then that interest rate is used by all banks and lending institutions, and it's paid attention to extremely closely, especially in the investing world. And whenever people go to buy a home, for example, it's probably one of the more relatable times it comes into play. That's where that interest rate comes from. So right now you could get interest rates as low as, I don't know, 3.5%, 4%,
Yes.
something like that. Well, that, let's say it's 4%, is 2.5 as that base rate plus a little bit. And there's some other things that go into that little bit, which I'm not sure off the top of my head and probably aren't really important. But basically, if the Fed raises that from 2.5 to say 4, well, guess what? that mortgage rate, that's going to go up that 1.5 or 1.5 percentage. So that's directly tied to those things. So let's bring it right back around though to the crypto. So why would people want to do it? Because as the government, whichever government it is manipulating that money supply, and as political things are going on, things like martial law being declared because there's some big upset with the people. For example, in Argentina, I don't know exactly when, sometime within the last couple of decades, their currency value just tanked because there was so much unrest with the government and the people were unhappy with it, which, on one hand, it's good that it led to change in theory. To be honest, I'm not familiar enough with those events to be able to give my opinion on it. But it did lead to some sort of change happening. But the downside is, hey, if I was in Argentina and I had $1 million Argentinian dollars or whatever they're called, after that value tanked, that was effectively like $50,000 or something like that.
Right.
Yeah, and so that's why you have crypto, is to remove the government aspect from that.
Yeah, and what's kind of fascinating is almost all of these are the further we get into it, the funnier it gets, because we have things like the GameStop scandal and things like this, where what we have realized from a long time ago is that almost everything, we've decoupled currency from things like the gold standard or something like that. So now it's based on broader measures.
Right.
And these can be perceptual. So it's a faith-based or a belief system, which is funny because if you get back to the very beginning of money, it was all about belief and promises. And now we've taken it back there again, but in a fascinating sort of corrupted way. But the idea is that Dogecoin or whatever it is, if you put enough faith behind it and enough belief behind it, then it actually increases in value. And so now this is a manipulable scale that can be used. And that's a really fascinating idea to kind of get into, and it was one of the things that really happened as well with when we're talking about things like Argentina, right? The lack of stability, and you want something that is not tied to your government, to your governmental choices. You don't want it tied to corruption. So it's a kind of safety mechanism to ensure at least some level of personal stability for your wealth.
Yeah, and I will point out that there actually was a country within the last few weeks, if not at least the last few months, that actually declared their national currency was a form of cryptocurrency. Did you hear that one?
No, it sounds great.
Yeah, it's pros and cons, right? So let's talk about the downsides of it. But it was a South or Central American country. I want to say potentially El Salvador, but I could be wrong about that. Again, we'll let the fact checkers double check that. Just Google country accepts cryptocurrency as national currency, and I'm sure you'll find out which one it is. But, we're talking about the purpose of this is to be outside of the government, in theory, to be more stable. But then the natural progression is, but Reed, I've been watching these Bitcoin and it goes up and down and up and down. And how is that more stable? And I'll get to a reason why it's less stable. But I want you to talk a little bit about how, this crypto has become yet another thing for, I'll use a loaded term, finance bros to make more money on, and even the layperson. Talk a little bit about that.
And this might be when we can circle back to the idea of the GameStop, is that of course GameStop did this fascinating thing where it not so much about GameStop itself, but the companies that they were sinking money into, they got a whole bunch of push on. Oh, sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. But they got a whole bunch of push on inflating currency or a certain amount of stock. So you can push stock up just by having people start buying it up. And it's sort of, there's this idea of shorting and all these kind of things that came into that. And I'm sort of shorting out mentally on it right now. I don't know why. But what's so fascinating about it is the bros can all gang up together, or the laymen can all gang up together, right? You might actually consider bros to be part of the cultural tribe of economics.
Right.
While you can have a bunch of nerds sitting at home that are just guys that are interested, or girls. It just happens to be predominantly be men for some reason that do this kind of nonsense. But what's kind of fascinating is you can get enough people together and you can declare something valuable and you can get people to sink their money into it, and then the stock market has to adjust
Right.
according to these purchases. And so to reflect the reality of this charged atmosphere that you have created, then the stock market actually goes up, and that's how people make money. So it's artificial manipulation of stock prices, and this can also happen in currency world, right? So
Right.
for instance, Elon Musk sends out a text saying something about Dogecoin, it instantly shoots through the roof in value simply because it's recognized by Elon Musk. And then later he can make fun of it on Saturday Night Live and it immediately tanks.
And it tanks down.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And there's a lot in that world and also in the financial world at whole that I'd love to talk about. And I definitely would love to get some experts on for, to put a little weight behind some of the thoughts. And yeah, hear where I'm wrong and hear where I'm right. Because I've had plenty of thoughts about that, especially over the last few years with things like cryptocurrency and things like the GameStop thing that you're talking about. Because in my mind, I feel like the financial market should not be able to be manipulated quite so easily. But I would love to be disproved on. Well, I don't know if I'd love to, but I'm curious to be disproved on that.
Yeah, there's ups and downs on all of these things, and for every answer, it is fascinating because economies do have that cascade effect, right? It is the butterfly flaps its wings,
Right?
And or it farts and it creates a tsunami somewhere else.
Right.
This is what happens with these kind of complicated and complex systems.
Right, and that's very true. And so for those of you who are like, man, I feel like they barely scratch the surface on this one, right? Well, the reality is that we have, and so this is going to be a topic that we're going to talk about in the future. And once we get fancier, we'll include links in the description to the series of the clips where we talk about cryptocurrency.
Yeah, and one of the more fun things that we're going to probably talk about more in the future too is NFTs, or non-fungible tokens, which is to turn a digital asset into a unique entity.
Right, and looking forward to talking about that. And then we'll also talk a little bit more about what actually is money and what is its purpose, and a little bit about the evolution from back in the day when it was rocks and shells, to when it became coins, to when paper money got involved, to when paper money was less and less involved, and now it became more and more digital, to cryptocurrency. And then we'll also talk about some of the things that you already talked about, which was the gold standard. And if you look on the U.S. dollar bill now, it's like backed by the full faith and power of the U.S. government, something along those lines. Talk about what all of that means, both in theory and in reality. Because one of the areas I've found when I'm talking with regular Joes and Janes about cryptocurrency that they have the hardest time around, which is also very true with NFTs, is how is that valuable? How is that thing valuable? This digital thing, like, how is that valuable? And the little teaser for you is, well, how is the dollar? How is a US dollar valuable?
Yeah, it's all really kind of the same thing. And that's what's so fascinating, is that we do think things are valuable if we're accustomed to giving them value. So it's really a perceptual shift.
Yeah. Well, that we'll put the pin in that one for now, because as with most topics, we could clearly go on talking forever, right?
Yeah.
But now we're going to bring on Danielle to talk a little bit about tarot, and then she's going to do a reading for Ryder. But before we do that, I wanted to show you guys this intro that we made for Helpful for Life over a year ago, and I've put it in my videos in my course, Kickstart Your Kitchen. And now I wanted to start incorporating into our show near the beginning, as intro videos typically are. But yeah, here's just a little quick video for you guys. Helpful for Life. And just like that, we've now brought the magical Danielle over to the couch.
She just appeared.
She transported through digital land. So let us see if I can get her microphone working.
Hello. Hi. Testing. 1, 2, 3.
And let me check one more thing. Almost there. And we'll say hello, I'm Reed. Danielle, say something.
Hello, I'm Danielle.
Hi.
I'm that guy.
I'm that guy. Oh my gosh. Say that guy again.
That guy.
Okay. Well, you know what? You can hear all of us. I'm not sure if we're as loud as we should be, but we'll figure that one out in post, as they say. Well, let's talk about tarot, Danielle. So, for those people at home who've never even heard of tarot, which, in case you're not aware, is spelled T-A-R-O-T, tarot.
In Texas.
Yeah.
Tarot.
Tarot. Give me one of them tarots. Tell us a little bit about what tarot is.
Well, it's interesting that it comes up on this episode because tarot decks, so they're divided into 2 sections, which is the major arcana and the minor arcana, and arcana means secret. So they're basically encrypted secrets inside this deck of cards.
Interesting.
And
we said, a different type of magic, right?
Yeah.
Definitely. And some people see tarot cards as fortune telling, telling the future, tools of a psychic, but you don't have to be psychic to use tarot cards. And I actually started using them just to come up with journaling prompts for myself in the morning. So, intuitive tool, whenever you pull a card, listening to whatever thoughts or images come to your mind, not necessarily fortune telling, but yeah. So
Yeah, well, real quick, I just wanted to say that over the last I don't know how long it's been now, but we'll just say a couple years.
2 years.
The last 2 years, okay. Danielle's been exploring a little bit more of the what the term is, the metaphysical side of things, or the woo-woo side of things, or the witchy type of things, and as she's explored more of that, it's been an interesting thing because having me, electrical engineer, highly analytical, very science-backed, seeing her go into these things, and also even just things like listening and reading horoscopes and stuff like that, it's quite the contrast,
Yeah, I mean, I'm always a little bit scared of these people that practice the dark arts, but Danielle seems friendly.
Shh! Don't say her name.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, but one of the things that has been at least one of my big learnings and takeaways from seeing her learn about it is that it's not as scary or evil or insert negative adjective here as a lot of people like to say. It's not this I want to say voodoo magic, but the voodoo magic in and of itself is probably along those same lines. Things get cast in a certain light, being in media and movies and things like that. And this is one of those cases where I feel like it's only the downside. It's filling a role most of the time in the media.
Yes, yeah. Well, and just like we were talking about with the dollar, there's things that you're accustomed to, and
Right.
there's things that you aren't, right? And so this is one of those that most of us didn't grow up around, or if we did, it was our parents telling us, that's the devil.
Yeah.
So, we end up taking on cultural values, but I've played a little bit with, what is it, I Ching, or what, this sort of stock shaking and coins from Asian countries as a way to sort of think about the future. Right, because it drops out something and you get a code and you get kind of a cone that you then look at and you go, oh, how does that affect me right now?
Interesting.
And
What was the name of that one more time?
Oh, I think it's like I Ching or Ao Ching, something like this.
I haven't heard of that.
And it was early in college and somebody gave me a little book on it. And you can even just do it with a couple of coins and sort of just, you pull the coins out and you flip them on the ground and it lays out a pattern. You look up what that pattern is and it's, short, long. And that will tell you to look on a certain page. You look on the page and there's some words there. Those words can generate meaning for you because it's really fascinating the way the human brain works. We align patterns very easily. And once we spot a pattern in something, then we can apply it to almost any situation.
Yeah. Danielle, do you have any thoughts on, I don't know, how tarot or this other things are perceived, or do you feel like we kind of talked about most of the things?
Well, I was just going to say that that kind of ties it in nicely. Meaning is where you look for it, or you can find meaning or make connections or find patterns wherever you seek them. So that's kind of what tarot is to me. It's me intentionally evaluating or reflecting on whatever the card makes me think of. So it's no more complicated or simple than that.
Yeah, and and that kind of ties into, to put it frankly, like why I'm okay with it, right? And why I don't discourage it. And one, because I'm really fascinated to learn a little bit more about it, and not just with this specifically, but tarot's been around for hundreds, if not thousands, or
hundreds, I think.
Yeah, hundreds of years. So if nothing else, I'm always fascinated to see those things that have been around for that long, and especially if they still persist in some way. One, because maybe there's something that they know or that they are right about that the regular average population is not. But also, if nothing else, it's just an interesting learning exercise. And at the end of the day, like, it only means what you want it to mean. And in my opinion, right? Like, if I go to a tarot reader or a future, whatever they're called, a fortune teller, or what have you, and they tell me something, like, in my mind, that doesn't destine it to happen, right? That's just, hey, here's one reading of something that could happen. And in my mind, at least as of right now, like, I don't see those 100% logically connected and or necessarily causation, or and also kind of like the weatherman, right? Like, it could also just be wrong, or maybe that is one version of a possible future, but it's definitely not deterministic in my mind.
Well, we have free will.
Well, we'll see.
We'll see. So yeah, so without further ado, let's get into the reading itself. So Danielle, while I move this camera around to give you a better platform to do it on, tell us a little bit about what a tarot reading is and how it works, and both, I guess, from a little bit about the layout and then maybe a little bit about the interpretation, and yeah, tell a little more about how you use it and what your weekly or however often you do it.
Okay, so a tarot reading, basically you shuffle in whatever way you want to, and then whenever you pull the cards, you look at them card by card. Sorry, I am just fumbling.
No. Oh no, this happens. This is what I was going through a minute ago. It's when somebody off screen starts moving around.
Yeah,
it's
I'm
really hard to keep your focus.
And I don't know what I was supposed to talk about anymore.
No, okay. So here, let's bring it back for you.
Let's just do the reading. Let's just do it.
Yeah, we'll do it. We'll
Sure.
just show an example.
Yeah, let's do it.
And I think Reed is going to narrate the reading in a very sexy voice.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
So, let's see. Make a flat surface.
And for those of you at home who are, wondering or are curious about how exactly this came up and how much prep work and advance notice Danielle was given, it was either last night or this morning. It was like, hey, what do you think about doing tarot? And she's like, okay, sure. So, as anything goes, especially with live, it's great to see that you're willing to jump out here and fail forward with us, Danielle. Welcome to the club.
Well, so this will be a reading for Ryder today. And we'll do so it's called a spread. So when you lay out the cards and you pick them.
Oh, I do that all the time.
Hey-o!
So, it's a very popular spread is past, present, future. And the way I like to read them is we'll look at the middle one first, which is the present, because when you're starting to learn tarot, they recommend just picking a single card every day. And that's like your daily card, and then you just kind of keep it in the back of your mind. Think about any events or situations that come up throughout your day that could relate back to that card, or that maybe that card has some sort of lesson or message for you that's relevant coming up that day. And the past is either a memory or a life lesson that is relevant to what is going on today. And then the future, it could be a possible future if you continue on your certain path, or it can be a a suggested action to take, or maybe some sort of encouragement, or something you can do to take this lesson of the message and apply it to your day.
The bottom line with all of these, right, is,
Yeah.
You can read about, you can learn about, whether it be, online or in books or what have you. You can learn different conventions for this type of thing. At the end of the day, it's a deck of cards. It is a standard deck of cards in the sense that, not that it's the regular 52, but why don't you flip over a card or two real quick on the thing. So there's different suits and there's different numbers. And in Danielle's case, she's got this certain kind where, at the top is kind of maybe hard to see, but that's an 8. And this is the 8 of what, Danielle?
Cups.
The 8 of cups.
8 of
so
cups.
these are a bunch of little cups, which to me look like jiggers, which make me think of shots, which, maybe we should do some shots. But yeah, so there's various suits and numbers. And so there's, of course, books and websites and all that kind of stuff where it can give you, some guidance as to ways that could be interpreted of what that symbology means, right? And then, of course, at the end of the day, you get to assign whatever meaning you want to it. So as she shuffles the deck here, Ryder, what's your exposure to tarot?
I've had it read for me once in the past, probably just post grad school, and then there's always, because in the art world, the cards themselves are fascinating. Like, most of us as artists have always thought about, like, what would be cool is to carve a chess set, making whatever weird characters I want,
right.
Or, paint my own tarot deck or something like that. So, interestingly enough, I'm more fascinated with the art that goes into them than I am in the actual sort of revelatory nature, which is, I don't know. It's also sort of fascinating to think that hearing about this sort of past, present, and future, this idea that these can kind of link together. It reminds me of an artist named Mark Tansey who would do his paintings based off of what is called a Tansey wheel. So it's the idea of using chance to set things up in your mind to create narratives. So the Tansey wheel would have like 3 rings on it. It'd be something like a noun, a verb, and an adjective or something. And then he'd spin them, and whatever the 3 points aligned on, he would make a painting tying those 3 together into a narrative.
Interesting.
And it was a way to create more creativity. It was a way to set yourself up to be more creative, to think outside of yourself.
Yep, you can use tarot cards for storytelling, for plotting a novel. You can, there's really no limit to how you can use them.
Well, and that sounds, at least from my understanding, very close to the way you use tarot, right? When you, I'm going to use this as a journal prompt. Let me have some stimulus to help me think of these things, right? And the brain is magical in that way, where when given a certain prompt, you'd be surprised where your brain can go, and also what you can remember once you start to remember certain aspects around it. It happened just yesterday, actually, when I was talking with Danielle. I made one side comment and mentioned one thing, and then 5 minutes later, she came up to me like in tears. She's like, "This made me think of this one thing," and oh my gosh, I didn't even know that this was repressed deep within my subconscious, but it was, evidently. Which, by the way,
So
is par for the
all I got
course
from
with Danielle.
that was Reed made Danielle cry.
Yes! Hey, many, many, many times. Danielle is a great crier.
Well, that time it was just reflecting in my own mind made me cry. So, but I will ask you now to cut the deck in any way you want and restack it in any way you want.
Okay. I'm not going to be original about this. I'm just going to...
Perfect. And so now we will do the reading. So, past, present, future. That one wanted to come off too, but... So,
Yes.
present. Ooh, Ace of Cups. That is a great card. So the aces in the tarot deck signify the best qualities of their suit. So the cups is one of the suits. It relates to the element of water. So it has to do with relationships, emotions, intuition, kind of those more like soft skills, as Reed puts it, in comparing us. Water is very much about, cups can relate to like family, love, So basically, whenever you see the Ace of Cups, it's like gifts are coming your way in the form of very positive emotions or relational fulfillment, connection. So this could be talking about the show and making connections and just like the hand is coming from the side of the card. It's like I guess an opportunity is presented is what the aces can represent as well. So maybe we'll learn more about what it's talking about by the other card. So the past. This is the Three of Wands. So another of the suits is the wands and relates to the element of fire. And the wand suits, the cards are talking about like passion and work and taking on like I guess passion projects or the so if you go from the 1 to the 10 in any suit, it sort of tells the story of the themes of those cards. So the 1 talks about or the cups will talk about like the journey that you go on in a relationship. So like the 2 of cups is meeting, and then the 10 of cups is like having a very fulfilled, rich family life. So then the wands, it's like at the beginning you're starting out with the project. The 2 of wands, it just has like, it kind of looks similar to the 3 of wands actually. It looks like a dude making a decision. You know, you're setting out, he's like looking out over the sea, kind of like, I see it as you have these options in front of you, and he's like choosing his walking stick to start his personal project journey. So
Remind me which position's which one more time.
this is present and past.
Okay.
So I guess to tie this together, maybe something in your present you need to think about whenever you were starting a passion project and making decisions about like what to focus on. So like he's looking now towards this one and those 2 are to that side. So yeah, I guess
Yeah.
Prioritize.
we'll see what the future action. So this is the Knight of Swords.
Well, that's a cool looking card.
It is a great card, and it means
Looks just like you.
Yes. I'm gonna wear a cape tomorrow.
definitely. So after the suit, so in each suit, they have like the 1 through the 10, and then you have your court cards, which are kind of like the face cards in a regular standard deck, which instead of the Jack, Queen, King, Ace, you have the Page, Knight, Queen, King, and then the Ace is like tied in with the numbers. So the court cards are kind of interesting because they can each be talking about a different personality, maybe some trait that you need to cultivate in yourself. And
Sword wielding.
Cape wearing.
Yeah.
Cape wearing.
There's 4 suits and there's 4 court cards in each. So there's 16 total court cards, which they each relate to a Myers-Briggs personality type.
Oh, wow.
That's one of the ways to look at it that I find interesting just because I love personality types. So I'll have to go look up what this one is afterwards. I'd be curious if it's any crossover with, if you know your type. But
Yeah, I'm an INFJ, I think.
INFJ. Okay.
Yeah.
Infage.
Thanks, Myers-Briggs.
Yeah.
Really makes it sound great.
And then amongst the court cards, I guess the knights talk about action, moving forward, transition, and then of all of the knight cards, each knight is on a horse, but they're in a different position. So there's one knight where the horse is standing still, and that's like the card where it's talking about, you know, maybe the action you need to take is to stay the course and to be steady. Whereas this knight is the one in the most movement. It's the most action. He's like leaping forward, charging into battle. So it's, I would say it's a card of encouragement to take some sort of action in order to take advantage of this opportunity that's being presented.
Cool.
So, yeah.
This all sounds great.
Yeah.
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 I
Anything
don't
that
know.
pops to mind is
Yeah.
Oh, there's some things I don't really want to talk about on air.
Naturally.
But I think from the relationship side, there's some things here that are working out well. And also, there are these interesting opportunities like you're talking about with this podcast and with other things that I've been kind of focusing on lately that are seeming to come more and more into a form of fruition. And we've talked a little bit on the show about the shop that I'm having built right now, and this idea of sort of starting this new path, a new career by, staying at home and working and getting back into the woodworking more and doing some other things like that. But it would also allow me more sort of space and time to do podcasting and content development. And all these kind of things are nice, exciting ventures. There's just, I don't know, there feels like an infinite horizon that has opened up in the last couple of months. And that's not only on the relationship level, but possibly the job level as well.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's cool. And I'll go ahead and point out and mention that although the joke has been, many times that I would somehow fire Ryder, it's very possible Ryder may fire us as well. And, as
probably more probable.
I think it would be a great storyline for the show. Like, hey, they bring Tarot Reader on one time and then lose the co-host the next day.
Well, what would be really great, though, is if, co-host has all of his dreams fulfilled after 2 weeks on the Helpful for Life podcast.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
Hey, much more positive reading. I like that one. So again, it's all about how you interpret it. And so, we're at our time for today, but I wanted to encourage people to have a challenge for today. I have one or two things in my head, but do either of you guys have something that you think would be good to challenge our viewers with? No is a fine answer.
I was going to bring up something about look up NFTs, and I was like, nope.
Good call.
Well,
Good
I
call.
can do a journaling prompt.
There you go. All right.
So yeah, if you want to think about an opportunity that you maybe have been presented with recently, or something new that you could try, get out of your comfort zone, and think about an action you can take.
Yeah, I think that's a great takeaway. And for those of you who didn't catch that, that actually was a reference to this reading exactly. And, we did it through the lens of Ryder. But maybe go back and watch and listen as if through the lens of that those cards were for you, and see what that might make you think of and what ideas might come from it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm instantly feeling more confident without even knowing why.
Yeah.
I'm just like it's fascinating that almost nothing has really changed in the last few minutes, but seeing these cards and thinking about some things, it's just like, yeah, things are great. We're on the right path. Heck yes.
And I want to emphasize the fact that, in my mind at least, the way I rationalize this is the cards didn't make you feel that or think that, but they helped you prompt yourself to think about certain things in your life, which help you realize that, hey, maybe I am on the right track, and maybe those couple things I have been doing, which could lead to these greater things. And yes, there is that additional action I need to take, but yeah, it's helping you reflect on things that you've already done and you've already thought about, or at least are in your subconscious.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely pulling from what's already existing and just sort of framing it in a context that lets me think about it differently, and in this case, very positively.
And I guess the one big point is that small shift in mindset, it can make a very big difference. And that's another recurring theme, I think, that if we haven't already talked about on the show, we'll continue to talk about more and more, is that how important your mindset is and your headspace, which is a great transition to introduce and tease for our guest tomorrow. So if y'all were present last week, you might have heard us mention Known Wells of the Feely Human Collective. He will be our guest tomorrow. So we'll be talking a little bit about mental health, probably a little bit about mindset and things like that. And he's another person who we may end up having on multiple times, or if it's not him, we'll have similar experts on to talk a little bit about the mental headspace, and maybe we'll talk about therapy, maybe not. We'll talk about why people don't like these things, and we'll end with at least one challenge for people to take, just like every other day. So with that, this has been the morning show brought to you by Helpful for Life. Name set to change at some point. Topic set to change at any time. Audience set to exist at some point. And, later this week, we really do want to engage more with the viewers. And so we're going to be doing a little bit of a marketing push. Another topic we'll probably talk about, the difference between creating and marketing the thing, and how that second step often doesn't get taken a lot of times by artists and creators.
Right, it's not as much fun.
So with that, you guys have a wonderful day. Remember Danielle's challenge, just real quickly restated, is to
Watch the tarot reading journal.
there you go. And you guys have a wonderful day.